This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
One of my family's favorite desserts is Boston cream pie. So of course I needed to figure out how to make it into cupcakes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a sponge cake, but make them in cupcake form. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our muffin pan and we're going to line it with some paper cupcake liners. Now, I'd mentioned to you before I'm using this new non-stick muffin pan and it is working great, so I don't need to spray it or anything. So we're first going to start by measuring out our dry ingredients. Now I'm measuring out a half a cup of cake flour. That's not the same as regular all-purpose flour. It's a little bit lighter, and so I'm going to measure out 1/2 of a cup of that and put that into this little bowl. And then I do need a little bit more flour, and I'm going to use the all-purpose flour for this, just 1/4 of a cup. And I'm going to measure that out and add it to my cake flour in that little bowl. Next comes a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then just a quick little mix up with my little whisk. It's important when you're putting a bunch of these dry ingredients together that they be nice and mixed up before we put them in our mixer. Now next comes some of our wet ingredients. Now I'm going to use a little measuring cup here, and I'm going to measure out 3 tablespoons of milk. And then I'm going to put in this little measuring cup 2 tablespoons of butter. Now take the milk and butter and pop it in the microwave and start warming it in 10-second bursts. We want to pretty much melt the butter. And then after 10 seconds, give a little stir. If it's not quite melted enough, pop it back in for another 10 seconds. When the butter just gets to be a sliver, something like this, you can remove the cup from the microwave. The butter will melt the rest of the way at this point. So now it's time to start separating some eggs. So we need to separate 3 eggs so that we have 3 yolks separate from 3 whites. And the way I do it is like this. I have one bowl where I put the yolks, and then I have one bowl that I put the whites in, and then I use this little bowl to kind of separate them, because sometimes even the best of us will have a yolk that breaks on us, and if we were separating them out over the whites, it would ruin the whites. So that's why I kind of separate my eggs out like this. It makes it, when you're doing something like this, it can be a little tricky and you don't want to waste your eggs. Okay, so now it's time to take our whites, and we're going to go ahead and take our 3 egg whites and put them in the mixer on high speed until they start to get kind of foamy. And then once they get foamy, we're going to start and really gradually put in 6 tablespoons of sugar. Now, we don't want to dump the sugar in all at once because we want the sugar to really dissolve in these whites. So you'll notice I'm just sprinkling a little bit, letting it whirl around, sprinkle a little bit. Eventually, you're going to get all 6 tablespoons in with those whites, and then we're going to want to beat them until they're at a soft peak. Now I'm going to show you how that process goes. So after you get all of your sugar in, what's going to start to happen is the egg whites are going to start to get very white like this. Now you might think they look done, but if you stop the mixer like this and lift up, you'll see that they're still really, really runny. There just hasn't been enough air beaten into them. So we need to go ahead, put the whisk back on and crank it up to high and let it go for another couple of minutes, and then we'll check it again. Okay, so after a couple of minutes, notice how they're starting to get a little shiny. They're starting to make some tracks with the whisk in the egg whites. That's a good sign. Well, let's have a look. We'll take the whisk off. We'll kind of dab it into the egg whites, and let's see if we have soft peaks. No, not quite yet. They're still a little too loose. So let's put the whisk back on, and let's go another couple of minutes. So after another couple of minutes, we see that the whisk is making bigger tracks in the egg whites. That's a good sign. We turn the mixer off, we undo the whisk, and we dab it into the egg whites, and we see that the egg white just kind of it bends over. That's a soft peak. So we stop beating at this point and go back to our milk and butter. Now it's cooled a bit, so we're going to take and put a teaspoon of vanilla in with it. So now we're going to take our egg whites and we're going to dump them out of the mixing bowl and put them right into a large mixing bowl. This is where we're actually going to put all of the cake ingredients together. Now, once we get our egg whites out of our mixing bowl, we're going to take the mixing bowl and we're going to put it right back on the mixer. We're not going to wash it, and we're going to use the same whisk. We're not washing it. And we're going to take our egg yolks that we've separated, plus we're adding 2 more whole eggs. And we're going to put the mixer on, and we're going to beat those on a high speed and get them kind of broken up. And then we're going to start adding 6 tablespoons of sugar to the yolks. Now notice I'm not going quite as slow as I did with the whites because we have quite a bit of liquid in with those 2 extra eggs we threw in. But we want to add it just a bit at a time. And we're basically going to let this go for 5 minutes. Now, after 5 minutes, look at how pale and thick these egg yolks and the 2 extra whole eggs have gotten. This is exactly what we want. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take those light and fluffy egg yolks and we're going to pour them on top of the fluffy egg whites in our large bowl. Now, once we get all the eggs together, this is where we start adding the dry ingredients. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our flour mixture and we're just going to pour it, sort of sprinkle it right on top. Notice I'm not mixing, I'm just dumping it on top. And then I'm going to take my big spatula and I'm going to fold this about 12 times. Now, once I've done it about 12 times, it's not going to be all mixed up, and that's okay. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to take those egg whites and I'm going to move them over to the side, and I'm going to make just a little well. And then in that little opening, I'm going to pour my melted butter, my warmed milk, and my vanilla. And I'm going to keep folding all of this together. Now, what I want to do is I want to do it gently because basically I've just got a lot of air in these eggs, and if I beat it really hard or fold it in really hard, I'm going to deflate them, which would be bad. So I'm just going to keep folding until I don't see any flour streaks and it looks like all that milk has been incorporated. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large ice cream scoop and I'm just going to put 1 large scoop of this sponge cake batter into each of the cupcake liners. Now, most of the lift that these cupcakes are going to get is from that fluffy eggs that we've done. So we don't have to worry about these raising really high and going over the edges. So you can put quite a bit of the sponge cake batter in each of the liners. Now we're going to take these and put them in a preheated 350-degree oven for just 12 minutes. Now during that 12 minutes, we're going to start getting our pastry cream filling ready. And I have this really easy way that I've been doing it for years. It tastes great and it goes pretty quickly. So what I do is that I get a microwave safe bowl and I put in 3 cups of either 2% or whole milk. And then I get a box of the vanilla pudding, but it's the cook and serve kind, not the instant kind. And I add that to my milk. And then then I take my whisk and I kind of whisk that all together. So then I pop this into the microwave and I start cooking it, and I cook it in 5-minute increments. It takes about 11 minutes or so, but basically what you want to do is after 5 minutes, take it out, give it a whisk, and then pop it back in for another 5 minutes. Now you keep doing this every 5 minutes until it starts to boil. You don't want it to boil over, but you want to see bubbles, and it should start getting thick like this. And then pull it out of the microwave and just set it aside. Now we can't put it in the refrigerator yet, but every now and then I just go over and give it a whisk to get sort of some of that heat out of the pudding until it gets cool enough that I can put it in the refrigerator. So now the cupcakes have all baked up. Notice how much they've shrunk, which is kind of neat. And I take a really dull knife, like just a butter knife, and I pull them immediately out of the pan. I don't let them sit there. Now, every now and then there will be one where a little bit of the cake has sort of welded itself to the side of the muffin pan, and that's where the knife comes in handy. Just kind of run it around there and then put them all on a rack so they can start to cool. Now, while the cupcakes are cooling, we're going to go ahead and beat our whipped cream because that's the second part of our pastry cream filling. So I take about 1/2 cup of heavy whipping cream and put that in the mixer. And then I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar to that. And then I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Then I'm going to let this whip around on medium-high speed until it gets nice and thick and whipped creamy like, just like this. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get my whipped cream and I'm going to transfer that into a little bowl, sort of a medium-sized bowl. And then if my pudding is chilled enough, I'm now going to add my pudding to this. Now I'm going to measure out about 2 cups of my chilled vanilla pudding, and I'm going to add that to my whipped cream, and I'm going to go ahead and fold that all together. Now what happens here is if you just use vanilla pudding, the filling is kind of heavy. If you add the sweetened whipped cream to it and fold these things together, then it gets this kind of nice fluffy texture with all of that great flavor, and it makes a really nice pastry cream. So now it's time to start filling our Boston cream pie cupcakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a really sharp little paring knife and I'm just going to kind of make a little hole in the center of these cupcakes. Now the sponge has kind of created a well for me, which is nice, but I want that filling to go way into the cupcake. I want when you take a bite out of this, I want there to be a lot of that pastry cream. So just go through, the cupcakes are cool now, and take your sharp little knife and just make like a little dime-sized circle. Pop that cake out. Then to pipe this filling in, I'm just going to get a zip bag and I'm going to put the filling, all of it, into this zip bag, and then I'm going to clip off a corner. And then I'm going to take the bag and I'm just going to start piping that pastry cream right into the center of the cupcakes. Now the reason I use this method instead of just spooning it is you notice I don't want it to cover the top of the cupcake. I really just want to kind of fill those little wells that we've created. So if you put it in this baggie like this, it kind of helps you control it a little bit better. Now I'm going to take these and pop them into the refrigerator. And now I'm going to get my chocolate ganache ready. And for that, what I'm going to do is take 1/4 cup of heavy whipping cream, a cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips, and then 2 teaspoons of light corn syrup. And I'm going to take all of that and I'm going to put this into a little saucepan and I'm going to put it on medium heat. Now, chocolate ganache is supposed to be this really silky smooth chocolate sauce, and so it does take a couple of minutes for the chocolate to start melting and the cream to start warming up, but don't panic. It just starts going kind of like this, and after just, 3 or 4 minutes, you'll start to see that this chocolate sauce really starts coming together nicely. Now, the thing I like about this chocolate ganache recipe is you can use it for lots of different things, but because we add that little bit of corn syrup, it keeps the chocolate sort of pliable, although when it's chilled, it firms up really nicely, but because of the corn syrup, it doesn't make it hard and brittly. It keeps it kind of pliable, which is really nice. So here we are. The chocolate ganache is just perfect, nice and silky smooth. So we'll go ahead and take it off the heat. We'll get our cupcakes out of the refrigerator, and then taking a large spoon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically put a dab on top of each cupcake. Now again, you notice I'm not going all the way out to the edges. I'm keeping it right in the center. Now, once I've gone ahead and put a little bit of chocolate on the center of each cupcake, I'm going to come back with a small little offset spatula or a small little knife, and I'm going to move that chocolate ganache on top of the cupcakes. Now, I'm moving it out just a little bit, but I really want to see an edge of cake around these, but I want the chocolate ganache to totally cover the pudding. I almost want it to be a surprise when somebody bites into them. So just go ahead and move that ganache around. And then you're going to want to take these and pop them right into the refrigerator. And then when you want to serve one, look at them. They're so delicious. That sponge cake is so nice and light and airy. And that pastry cream is so rich and vanilla-y. And then I was actually able to cut a wedge out of this one. And you can see how the chocolate ganache holds its shape. That's because of that corn syrup. Well, I hope you'll give these Boston cream pie cupcakes a try. To get the recipe, just go to our website at www.harwoodpodcast.com. I'll see you next time.